Oh, hey guys. Didn't see you there. Say, I'm going to go over the story questions because it seems like there's a few of you that didn't quite understand it. The first one, of course, here is after 20 years. Now, I want to explain what exactly happened in the story since reading some of your guys' questions, I think you're a little confused. So, um, here's like how it all breaks down. Okay, so here's how the story sort of goes. We have Silky Bob here, played by Boba Fett. He's sitting in this dark doorway, and then you have this police officer that comes in and sees him and goes over to him and is like, "Hey, how's it going?" But before he can see anything else, Silky Bob here is like, "Oh, it's okay, officer. I was just meeting up with my friend. He blah, 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 blah. Don't worry, I'm not doing anything illegal." This guy's like, "Okay, well, are you going to call time on him soon?" And he's like, "No, if he's my best friend. If he's alive, I know he's going to be here." And he's like, "Okay, well, we'll see you later." But the thing is that this is actually Jimmy Wells. Okay? This cop right here was Jimmy Wells. He came up to meet Bob, his friend. But then Bob lit a match and he saw that he was a criminal. And he was like, "Uh-oh, you're a criminal? Well, now I can't say anything because I'm a cop and my best friend has become a criminal. So I can't arrest him myself." So he goes and he gets somebody else, and this plain clothes dude comes then. So this is not Jimmy Wells, even though he maybe looks a little bit like him. Who knows? Okay? And he comes up to him. He's like, "Hey, Bob, how's it going?" He's like, "Jimmy, is that you? Hey, hey, hey." And they go and they walk off and they're talking. And then he's like, "Oh, by the way, I'm not Jimmy. I've been a cop and I'm arresting you. And Jimmy gave me this message to give to you." And it says, "Oh, Bob, I was there at the appointed time and place, and you were a criminal, and I couldn't arrest you myself." Okay, so that's what it was. The original cop was Jimmy Wells, and the Jimmy Wells was just a cop who was in disguise, basically. Okay? I think some of you didn't understand that. So there you go. Now, I'm going to go through the questions. So, the first question is, did Officer Wells do the right thing? Now, if we were in class actually discussing this, it's kind of like a two-part question because the idea here is like, what is the right thing, right? Is it that Officer Wells turned his friend in, Silky Bob, or did Jimmy Wells, is the right thing not doing it himself? It's kind of a discussion that people had. A lot of times, some people, again, if we were having discussion, would bring up the idea, well, it depends, If you had a friend and they did something and they broke the law, would you turn them in? I think that's the question I want to focus on. And some people are like, well, it depends on what they did. It's like, fair enough, right? If they stole a candy bar from a gas station, or did they murder somebody, right? Totally different things, right? If you think about that candy bar thing, it can become a little bit more serious than maybe what you even think about. Because, if you steal a candy bar, let's say it's worth $1, right? Okay, no big deal, you think, right? But what if 100 people stole a candy bar because they all think, it's not a big deal, it's only $1. But now that's $100 worth of candy bars, okay? That the store owner isn't going to get money for. So the next time he puts candy bars out, maybe instead of $1, now he has to charge $1.50 because he wants to make up the money he lost when people stole all of those candy bars, okay? If I come into a gas station and I look and I say $1.50 for this candy bar, well, I can get that same candy bar for $1 over here. And so now I'm going to buy my candy bars over at this other store. So now that person not only is making money back from their lost candy bars that were stolen, but they now are not making any money because nobody's buying the candy bars because they're too expensive, because they've had to raise their prices. And eventually, if things spiraled out of control, the person would have to close up shop, close the store, go bankrupt, whatever, all because, you thought that stealing a $1 candy bar wasn't a big deal. For those of you that thought about if Jimmy should have turned it in himself, that's your own opinion. So, that's question 1. Okay, question 2 was describe the atmosphere or the feeling of the piece. Now, again, I'm not sure if people necessarily understood the atmosphere, the feeling. We're not talking necessarily about the weather, okay? That's not what they mean by atmosphere. The atmosphere is like, is it creepy? Is it scary? Is it mysterious? Is it happy or, cheerful or jolly? Which I don't think it's any of those things, but the fact that, it's dark, it's kind of rainy out, there's not a lot of people around, right? Like, doesn't that sort of give off sort of like a creepy, kind of mysterious, kind of spooky sort of atmosphere, right? We're not necessarily talking about the weather, but the weather does add to the feeling of that question. The next question is, how does the setting and the time of day affect the story? Now, you have to think about the setting. The setting is at night, okay? It's cold, it's rainy, the fact that there's not a lot of people on the street, this all affects the story, because you have to think of, would the story be different if it was in the middle of the day? And it would, because since it's set at night and it's cold and it's rainy, the fake Jimmy, okay, the regular police officer who is just in normal clothes, when he comes up to Bob, he wouldn't be able to, kind of, hide himself a little bit. Like, hey, Bob, how's it going there? Yeah, whew, it's really cold out here. I'm going to bundle up in my coat because it's chilly, and I'm just going to listen to your story. I'm walking next to Bob, right? You can't really see me all that well, right? Okay. Whereas if it's in the middle of the day and it's sunny and it's hot, okay, I wouldn't have my coat on. If somebody was walking around like this when it was like 100 degrees outside, it might look a little suspicious, right? The next question, where it says, how did Bob spend his time in the West? I read a lot of people's answers to that, and some of you were very vague. You said, well, he was, committing crimes and everything. And it's like, well, I was trying to get at, like, specifically, what do you think Bob did to get himself wanted, basically? And if you listen to the piece, like if you read it and you listen to what Bob is saying, I think the author gives us some clues, because he doesn't come out straight away and say, oh, Bob murdered people or whatever. In the story, it says, I was hustling around a bit. That phrasing is kind of interesting, because the wording hustling around, it could mean like he's moving all over the place, right? He's hustling around. But it could also mean he was hustling people, which is what con artists do, okay? They hustle you. They trick you into giving them money. So I think that's what was kind of a clue as to what Bob was doing and what he's wanted for, is that he's a con man. So yeah, I was just curious what you thought he was doing in the West. And some of you were not very specific about it. So, all right, question 5 says, what evidence do you have that Bob and Jimmy are proud of their accomplishments? With Bob, it's pretty easy, because he's dressed really nice. He has money, so he has that like diamond pin that's holding his tie. Plus, when Jimmy comes around, he sits there and talks about everything he's done. And, when you're proud of something, you usually like to talk about it, right? But Jimmy's is a little harder to find. But that's right at the beginning of the story, when we don't know that it's Jimmy yet, but we know that it's that later the police officer is Jimmy. Is that it says this about the police officer. It said, twirling his club with many intricate and artful movements, turning now and then to cast a watchful eye down the thoroughfare, Pacific thoroughfare, the officer, with his stalwart form and slight swagger, made a fine picture of a guardian of the peace. So question 6 is really just your opinion, but it does say, what does this story suggest about the passage of time and how it affects people? And so, for me personally, kind of the idea that I think that the author is going for here is that, things always change. Okay, time changes everybody. Because Jimmy, who is a plodder, as they said before, which is not good, that means somebody who doesn't really have a whole lot of ambition, he became a police officer. And it's like, he was able to change himself in 20 years. So the quick and dirty answer to that question really is that, time changes people. You're not going to be the same person 20 years from now that you are now. And then the last question, is there such a thing as lifelong friends? That was total opinion question. What do you think? Some of you said yes, no. I would think yes. I have a friend from high school who I'm still friends with. Actually, he was a friend since kindergarten, and he's been my friend ever since kindergarten. I still hang out with them. It's hard to hang out with them because he lives in Portland, but I talk to him online playing video games. I text him all the time. That's the thing I think nowadays is that technology is going to make it so much easier for you guys to stay friends with the people you're friends with now. You can Snapchat them or, whatever, just all the time. Whereas, back in the day, if I had a buddy who left, when I was younger, we didn't have cell phones unless they mailed me a letter that had their phone number in there. I would have never had any other way of contacting them. I could have either called them or wrote them an actual letter, not until I was about in middle school, which I know makes me seem really old, but middle school is when, the internet was coming around and we had email and that type of thing, which opened up a whole nother door. And then you could, start doing instant messaging. That was a big thing when I was a kid. And then, obviously nowadays you have tons of different ways that you can stay in contact with your friends. But so personally, I think yes, it's easier now than I think it was back in the day. So, and there you go, guys. I explained those answers hopefully well enough for you, just so you know what was going on with the story. So I'll check you later. See ya.